My second video on structural racism in the UK is going to focus on the police and criminal justice system, as this is often cited as supposedly being one of the primary areas in which ethnic minorities receive unfair treatment in the UK. 2017 saw the publication of the government's official report and investigation into unfair treatment of ethnic minorities within the criminal justice system. Its chief author was Labour MP David Lammy, after whom the report was named. The report contains clear evidence that the number of black and ethnic minority individuals in various areas of the justice system are disproportionately represented as a share of the population. For example, black Britons, despite making up only 3.5% of the overall population, account for 10% of all arrests made in the UK. The same disparity is also present in the prison numbers. Once again, blacks are overrepresented at 12% of the prison population, and the total ethnic minority population is 25%, despite accounting for only 12% of the population at large. Ethnic minorities also, on average, serve longer prison sentences than prisoners of the white majority. The figures for police stop and search also make for similar reading, with 41% being ethnic minorities and 22% being black. Therefore, it is very clear that the figures across the board show us that the numbers are not proportionate to the relevant size of the different population groups. This naturally forms the backbone of the argument that has been made by numerous politicians, journalists and campaigners that Britain's police and criminal justice system is institutionally racist. As such, a strong link can be drawn between the British context and the recent events in the USA. And those who criticise and question the relevance of protesters taking to the streets of the UK to support the Black Lives Matter movement clearly haven't opened their eyes to see the injustice that is occurring in their own country. However, when you critically analyse the evidence, rather than just accepting it at face value, the claim that the system is racist towards minorities, and especially towards Britain's black minority, quickly begins to disintegrate. The principal reason for such confusion and why the figures already presented make the system look as if it were operating in a racist manner is that these figures focus almost entirely on the actions of the police and agents of law and order. Those who are imprisoned, arrested, or stopped and searched are treated as if they are simply passive victims in a process of unwarranted oppression, innocent bystanders who are being run over by the cavalcade of criminal justice. However, once we start to seriously focus on those who are breaking the law rather than those who are enforcing it, the numbers start to make a lot more sense. Of the 152,000 people found guilty of a criminal offence in 2018, 10% can be identified as being black British, which gives us the fairly simple explanation that the reason why black people make up such a large proportion of the prison population in the UK is because they commit a rate of crime that is almost 3 times greater than their 3.5% share of the population. This naturally raises the question if perhaps the higher numbers of blacks can be accounted for by them being unfairly prosecuted. Are the magistrates and the courts convicting a disproportionate amount of black people and therefore allowing racial prejudice to inflate the statistics? However, the figures here tell a different story. In 2018, the average conviction rate for whites was 85%, compared to 81% for blacks. And if we look at the breakdown for various different offences over a longer period of time, the numbers still aren't much to get excited about either. The Lammy report also confirms that the research shows that even all white juries show no significant racial prejudice in their decision-making, and studies from the United States show that they might even be marginally more lenient on minorities due to a fear of appearing biased. This still, however, leaves the question as to why black and minority ethnic prisoners receive longer prison sentences on average. Could this at least be a function of racist decision-making and give credence to the claim of institutional racism? Once again, government figures do a lot to solve this mystery. The principal reason why minorities receive longer sentences is that they consistently, across nearly all crimes, decide to plead not guilty rather than enter into plea bargains. This is especially true when it comes to the more serious offences, such as murder. According to the Lammy report, This occurs even in spite of the fact that minorities are much more likely to ask for and receive legal advice when facing prosecution. The principal reason for this is that minorities have less trust in the criminal justice system than the white majority. The Lamy report does suggest several ways in which this might be redressed, the greater provision of ethnic minority solicitors being one such suggestion. However, it is hard not to think that one of the main causes of this lack of trust is the constant projection of the same message by politicians, the media, and campaign groups that the system is institutionally racist. There can be no doubt that the recent coverage of the death of George Floyd and the subsequent protests in the UK, as well as in the USA, without any accompanying analysis of the underlying evidence for such outrage, will have worsened the situation and will lead to more young black people into making unwise decisions with regards to plea bargaining. The fact that the most recent edition of the BBC's political show, Question Time, in which not a single member of the panel was prepared to critically challenge the received wisdom of institutional racism, is sadly a case in point. Black and ethnic minority individuals are being betrayed by the very forces that should be doing the most to help them. Chief among these is David Lammy himself, who took the opportunity, when on Question Time, to tell young people to go out onto the streets during a pandemic and protest for a cause that his own report demonstrates doesn't exist. Particularly relevant to the question of trust is the often reported way in which police are supposedly using their stop and search powers to unjustly harass black and ethnic minority individuals. This is because, even though the total of such incidents has decreased over the past 5 years, the percentage of black people being stopped and searched has actually increased to 22% of the total in 2018. The situation in London looks even more concerning. In 2017, a black person under the age of 25 was 4 times more likely to be stopped and searched by the police than a white person of the same age, and were 9 times more likely to be stopped and searched for the suspected possession of weapons. Therefore, on the face of it, it looks entirely unfair that black youths should be under such undue suspicion by the police. But once again, as soon as we consult a few other statistics, the numbers prove to be more than justified. This is because, despite stopping a greater percentage of black people, the rate at which such searches leads to arrests is higher than for any other ethnic group. If, as it is constantly presented to us, the police were harassing black youths without a reason and searching them regardless of any sign of criminal behaviour, then you would expect to see the rate of arrest being far lower than for other groups, when actually exactly the opposite appears to be the case. Far from being a device which is used by the police for unwarranted harassment of minorities, stop and search is a tool that is saving lives. There is an argument made with respect to the supposed over-policing of black and minority communities having effect on the statistics. The argument goes that if the police suspect minorities of committing more crimes, then they respond by deploying more police resources to minority areas, and as a result, they catch more criminals from minority backgrounds. Expectation therefore becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The argument is a fairly interesting one. However, exactly what one is to make of it is not exactly clear. It would not be surprising if there was indeed some form of positive feedback loop at play in the numbers, though surely there is also good reason to believe that over-policing might eventually have the effect of reducing crime stats in an area due to the factor of deterrence. As already explained, with respect to the stop and search figures, there really doesn't seem to be a case for the idea that the police are harassing minorities purely for its own sake. Is the recommendation of such an argument that more of the limited resources that the police possess be sent to low-crime neighbourhoods or areas where the police don't suspect crime is taking place, a concept that seems fairly quixotic? It also presumes that there is no positive aspect to police presence in a neighbourhood. If we look at this within the context of London, the figures seem to suggest that there is indeed a stronger case for the argument that under-policing is the main problem facing minority communities. Despite only making up 13% of the city's population, black Londoners account for 43% of murder victims, with Londoners of Asian ethnicity coming in at 40%. Clearly many people will be left wondering why there are such high levels of criminal activity in the Black British community. Though it wasn't principally the aim of this video to provide such explanations, let me draw your attention to a fairly uncontroversial factor that you will seldom ever hear talked about in the media. As mentioned in my other videos, the average age of black people in the UK is almost 10 years younger than the white majority. This is significant because, as a rule, young people usually commit more crime than older people. Just as the majority of all of the people the police stop and search are young people and not old. Though it can be absolutely guaranteed that this will never be mentioned as a factor in news media or by politicians. It is certainly absent from the Lammy review. Though, whatever we make of such an explanation, the important thing is that there is little to no evidence whatsoever that the police or criminal justice system in the UK are operating in an institutionally racist manner. Yet the rumour persists. Sadly, it is just too easy to sell a grievance narrative than it is to think critically. Once again, this is best evidenced by David Lammy himself, who, at the end of his own report that fails to provide a single shred of solid evidence that there is institutional racism in the system, writes the following: "My conclusion is that BAME individuals still face bias, including overt discrimination in parts of the justice system." One seriously wonders if he actually read the report that he put his name to. The Harvard psychologist Steven Pinker has tried to draw our attention to the problem that arises from making critical analysis of issues such as race and crime a taboo subject. This is that if we don't acknowledge and work with the facts as they exist, then we effectively hand them over to be employed by far-right hate groups and extremists. Just as, in the process, we also handicap young people from ethnic minority backgrounds into thinking that the police are their enemy, which then leads to scenes like those that occurred only a few days ago in London, where police officers are being attacked and ambushed for carrying out their duty of trying to protect the vulnerable. The truth needs to triumph before, very soon, we all go mad.